What's going on, FPL managers? Welcome to another video and podcast from Fantasy Football Scout. No, you haven't accidentally clicked on a TED Talks video. I'm here with Pras for his burning question section, and I'm filling in for FPL Sonaldo. After you guys had some technical difficulties earlier on. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing very well. Firstly, I'd like to start with apologizing to the viewers. I know a lot of you were waiting for over 30 minutes, so sorry about that. Yes, we did have some technical issues. Andy was at work and he didn't have the right equipment, and for good reason. We won't go into why he was still at work, but we hope all is well with Andy, and thank you very much, Ted, for stepping in.
That's no problem at all. He's a good boy, isn't he? He works hard. And we've all been there with the technical difficulties, so, it is what it is. But we're here now. We're going to talk about FPL. Can't wait to get stuck in. Praz, you're going to guide me with all my transfers for the rest of the week, mate.
Yeah. We're here. Look, the idea of this stream was we had done a very comprehensive strategy video a week ago. And so this one was basically freestyle. Let's just take questions from, the people on Twitter and live questions here. And we've sort of sectioned this video in those various topics, and we can dive right into it. I mean, we usually, unlike the TED Talks, we don't talk about last week. Even better, because I had a terrible game week 30, so we don't need to discuss game week 30 at all.
Me too, to be fair. So let's skip right past that.
Right. So getting into the first slide, which is basically questions on TAA. Everyone wants to know, should we sell him? Should we hold him? So I'm going to read out the way we'll do this is we'll read out some questions from people on Twitter. On the live chat, please feel free to add as well to the extent they're not covered, and we'll go through each question or each theme as you will. So I'll start with Ron Mukherjee's question. So he asks, if TA is out for the next couple of weeks, is the play to get in Cancelo? I don't have a wild card though. I have Robertson and Rudiger in my team. So this question basically plays into the fact that without a wildcard, should you be selling Trent? Then you also have FPL_up, who's saying, is TA, Robertson, Cancelo, and Reece too big at the back? So we'll take this in themes. So first, I'll come to you, Ted. You're not on a wildcard. What are you thinking? Trent out or hold?
I think there's a simple solution to this. If you have a wildcard left, I think he's fine to sell, because obviously, he'll be out for Watford. He's got Man City in 32 and then not a double in 33. If you're wildcarding in 34, easy to get him back. Me, I haven't got a wildcard, and I'm not sure you do either, Praz.
I don't either.
Very difficult to sell him, in my opinion. I was looking at it. But the problem is, once you sell him and downgrade him to either a Robertson or a Cancelo and use that cash to fund other players, it's very difficult to psychologically get yourself back in game week 34 and upgrade a player back to Trent. It doesn't feel like you're progressing your team in the game. You're backtracking a little bit. And I think you're just going to end up one transfer behind from game week 34 when City, Chelsea, Aston Villa, Palace all have decent fixtures. So it's a big no for me if you don't have a wild card.
Right. Okay. I'm with you. And I'll talk about two exceptions here. So exception number one, if you're in a position where you're happy with your team, right? You already have a few premiums. Let's say you have Robertson already, James already, Rudiger already. So you have a sort semi-big at the back, and you had Trent. And so you wanted to get to Cancelo. No other problems in your team. Your midfield looks good. Your forward line looks good. In that case, maybe you can make a case for selling Trent because you're well set up for the future. So I think for these guys, I would say probably there's an exception. You could look at it, because I don't think team value comes into it. I mean, you mentioned this, Ted. In fact, you didn't talk about team value rightly, because I think this is not the time to worry about team value. I mean, people sold Cancelo and profited from it 4 weeks ago, right? We all got Robertson, or some of us got Robertson, some got James, and made huge profits. So who is to say that if you were to jump off ship and you were happy with the rest of the team, that you could not make gains there? So just something to consider. But I think overall, I'm with you. There's only 8 transfers until now and to the end of the season. If you're looking to get Trent back in, I think it's very dangerous to lose him, right?
It's really, really tempting to move him on and commit to not having him for the rest of the season. Have a Robertson, Reece James, Cancelo back 3. But the problem is with Trent, he's such a key player and he has the capacity to go big in big games. He's going to have a high effective ownership still. he's someone who could send your rank plummeting if he goes big in any given game. And I'm just terrified of doing that. I've done that plenty of times over the last few seasons. Absolutely painful to go without him. So yes, I know we shouldn't make our FPL decisions through fear of not having a player, because, you know, you can cover certain players with spreading the cash across your squad. But just for me, I'm not that kind of player. I'm not going to risk it. I'd rather boost the rest of my squad.
I think that's fair. So like I mentioned, I think the first case of people that could look at it is if your whole team is fine and you have one transfer you want to get to Cancelo. I think the second type of people who are looking to chase and think, look, Robertson might cover Trent anyway, and I'm happy with the rest of my backline. What do you think about that? So can Robertson cover Trent?
I mean, he's certainly in incredible form at the moment, Robertson. But I think we looked at this on the video on Monday, actually. All of his big chances created are being converted on a 100% scale. So it's not sustainable. He's doing far, far better than the numbers suggest, which is fine. He plays for an absolutely fantastic team in Liverpool. He's got absolutely fantastic players around him who are going to convert those big chances. But going forwards, those are probably not sustainable. And, you know, I hate saying that because it feels like a cop-out. I think Robertson probably can match Alexander-Arnold over a good few game weeks, but I think Trent is the big game player and he has the capacity to go big, as I said earlier. It's really difficult. It's really difficult. I actually think if you compare him to Cancelo, which is going to be a very popular transfer pick, I actually don't think Cancelo comes anywhere close to Trent or even Robertson or even Reece James for that matter. And I would personally suggest going for the likes of Laporte over Cancelo. We looked at this on Monday as well. Cancelo's had 60 shots this season. 60. And he scored 1 goal. All of them are small chances. And, I mean, the 5% conversion for those small chances means that he should have scored about 3, but he scored 1. And so his technical ability, he's been underperforming those shots, and he hasn't really created that much compared to Alexander-Arnold and Robertson. So I'm a little bit skeptical of Cancelo. I know you have him in your team. Am I talking utter nonsense? Is he just an incredible asset and I'm just overthinking things?
Look, I mean, this is a nice segue to the table that we put up here, and for the listeners, this is basically XGI created by all defenders since the beginning of the season. And so you have Trent at the top with an XGI of almost 13. This basically means that he should have had 13 goals and assists, goals plus assists over the season, and he's got 13. So he's actually just matching his XGI for the season. Second, you have Cancelo, and he's at 7.7. He should have had 7.7 goals plus assists. He's got 6, so he's actually underperforming his XGI by about 2. Then you have Reguilon, you have James, you have Robertson. So all the guys who you'd expect to be there. Obviously, Reguilon will have minutes issues once Sessegnon is back. But these are the guys. I mean, this is the reason people are talking about Trent, Cancelo, James, and Robertson is because these are the 4 guys at the top. Now, to your point, Laporte isn't too bad, actually. He's got an XGI of 4, and he's also underperforming his XGI by about 1. So he should have had, sorry, am I reading this? Yes, he's got 3 goals and assists, and he should have had 4. So I don't think Laporte is that bad, but personally, I think Cancelo is the one to get.
It's interesting, though, because the underperformance is coming from the assists, so it's presumably a teammate that's let him down. I just find it fascinating that he's got 3 goals and Cancelo's got 1, when Cancelo's had like 20 more shots than Alexander-Arnold in the entire season. So crazy. I think Laporte's probably a decent option, but I mean, we talked about this on Monday as well. Like, Cancelo is an absolute bonus magnet. He's so involved in the attacking play, and that's going to earn him bonus points. So yeah, there's definitely a counter argument for it. But I think I'm shopping in the bargain aisle with Laporte, I think.
Yeah, no, look, you can't fault it. He's the highest centre back in the list, and this is all season, despite the fact that he wasn't playing all the games. I mean, I know this season he's been a favorite back again after last season, but in terms of centre backs, they're as good as it gets with Laporte. But coming back to replacement, so there's people who are saying, look, we're on Wildcard, or they may choose, look, there's a risk appetite point as well. Some people are chasing, they're at 150K. They just go, look, we're going to back against Trent. This is going to be a theme with Salah as well. And they just go, look, this is end game. we have to take a risk, and we will happily accept the punishment if we're wrong. But what if we're right? So they've decided to sell Trent. They're picking now. They've got all the money in the bank. They're picking between Cancelo, James, and Robertson. What are your thoughts just on these three?
I think if Reece James is fit, I think he has to be the priority for me, because Chelsea's next two games in particular are very appealing. I think it's Brentford and is it Southampton in 32. Both teams pretty poor for big chances conceded. Reece James is absolutely electric form when he's not injured. Robertson has Watford, which is an absolutely fantastic fixture, but then he has City. So I think Reece James over the next two, is probably the priority. And equally so, City have Burnley and then Liverpool. So one good, one bad. I would rank the City options as the least priority. I would go Rudiger or Reece James first, and then Robertson. The scary thing is that when we look at game week 31 in isolation, Liverpool and City have absolutely huge upside, because Burnley and Watford are absolutely fantastic fixtures. And we have lots of players to get rid of, Pras. We have lots of Wolves, lots of Villa, and lots of Leeds players to get rid of. Do you think there's a temptation to rush these transfers? Because we suddenly all panic that we need to bring all of these Liverpool, City and Chelsea players in. We need them all, and we need them now. What is your attitude to that? Do we think we need to be a little bit more cautious?
I think you can phase it out. I mean, to be honest, Dean has a decent fixture against Wolves this week. Rafinha has very good fixtures over the next two. So I don't think the answer is you have to rush it. But look, there is obvious upside to it. And to the extent you can get to some of these transfers, you should. And this also brings back to the discussion on, if you have all these other problems in your team, why are you looking to sell Trent or Salah? I mean, come on, you should be looking to sell Kilman or Saiz first. So assuming you don't have those problems, then sure. So it comes back to, is Trent a buy or is a hold or a sell? If you have other problems and you're going to be taking hits down the line and you're going to bring back Trent later, it's just something you don't need to be dealing with. I mean, identify the 2 weak spots in your team. If you need to take a hit for those 2 weak spots. And if that gets you a premium defender, great. Don't be taking those hits for Weghorst or any other Everton player. Don't be taking those hits for Newcastle or Man United players, at least now. You have time and you don't need to get any of these guys. I mean, I slightly disagree with you on the James one, only because of minutes. I mean, if Thomas Tuchel comes back and says, he's completely looking fit and he's good, and he doesn't have this narrative. You remember the last time he was that, we have to see his output and how much he's I don't know what the word he used was, basically how much he's ready to play. And if he's again very coy, then that basically it rings alarm bells, because is he the guy who plays against Real Madrid or not? And by the way, Zoff in yesterday's Wire thinks that actually he won't play Real Madrid, or he may not play, because that's an Azpilicueta game. In that case, people who own James are quids in, because then he'll probably play the league game instead to get his fitness back.
So yeah, huge caveat. And I think most of these decisions we're making, we need to hear from the pressers. We need to hear from the managers to hear about these fitness concerns. And my caveat about James was, if he's completely fit, he would be my number one priority. But yeah, agree with you. If his expected minutes are low, all three of these teams have Champions League matches coming up in the next couple of weeks. Rotation is going to be rife, and the most injured players are going to be most at risk. So yeah, completely agree with that. If Reece James is expected to be rotated quite often and the minutes aren't certain, then Robertson would go to the priority for me.
Yeah, and I think last word on Liverpool, people considering Trent to Robbo, I think that's the wrong move, simply because I think we're struggling for a third Liverpool now. And if you want a third Liverpool for the run-in, for me, it's Trent and Robbo, not Trent or Robbo, because you should have the funds if you wanted to go big at the back to have both of them. So if you can get to a Robertson without selling Trent, I think that's obviously the better option. You need to find the funds at some point. There's no getting away from it. And you're not selling Kane or you're not selling Salah. So generate those funds now.
Exactly that. So if I ask you the same question, who would be your priority out of the 3 or 4 players? Cancelo, Reece James, Robertson, even Laporte or Rudiger?
I think For me, Cancelo is number 2 after Trent, simply because you have the best attacking threat and the best defensive, with the best defensive team. So if he doesn't do anything against Burnley, you walk away with 6 points. If he gets one assist, you get a 10-pointer, right? So that's the positive on Cancelo. I don't hate the Laporte shout, actually. I've seen here the data is there to back him. He's pretty nailed as well. So I think if you wanted to downgrade, either a Robertson to a Matip is not as good as a Cancelo to Laporte. So I can see the merit. But if you have the money, I think for me, Cancelo is the second best defender in the game. The XGI in the table here shows that. The eye test shows that. I would go for Cancelo as my number 2. Between James and Robertson, it comes down to an X minutes issue. I mean, if James is fit, I mean, he's number 1. He's probably ahead of even Trent if he was playing, week in, week out like Trent is. And then Robertson, I think these are the 4 guys to get. And for me, that would also be the order of getting them. I mean, look at Robertson and James's overperformance on XGI. They have an XGI of 5.5 and 5 respectively. They've got Reece has got 11 goals plus assist, and Robertson has got 10. Now they're good enough to do that, but imagine if Alexander-Arnold was overperforming by 5, he'd be on 18 goals plus assist right now. So it's just ridiculous. I mean, have they been lucky? I don't know, but the data suggests that they've done better than they should have.
I don't think they've been lucky. I think that they're just efficient with the chances that they create or the chances they have themselves. I think Trent has numerous of like attacking outputs, like crosses or shots from outside the box that just shoot over the bar that aren't really any threat to anything, but also increases XGI a little bit and then even out the overperformance. So I don't think that Trent is any worse than Reece James or Robertson. I think he just has a little bit more of those superfluous attacking outputs that Robertson and James don't. They're just much more efficient with what they create.
Yeah, awesome. And by the way, the last thing here that I notice is Rudiger is way down and not even compare. I mean, not that far off, but still, I think Laporte is a better shout for less money than a Rudiger. A lot of people did go Rudiger for that double game week 28, and going forward for the run-in, I think I think Laporte over Rudiger sounds better just in terms of the City is still playing for the league. So I like the Laporte shout, and that's one good takeaway.
Another thing that we haven't really talked about yet is we're talking about a lot of premium defenders that we need to fit in our side. And a big question, a big toss-up for all of us managers over the next few weeks is to decide whether we want to go big at the back or big in midfield. And we talked about this before we came on, Pras. But 4 or 5 big names in your midfield is almost going to be equally as profitable as going big at the back. So that's a big question, whether you hedge between some of these big defenders and some of the mid-price midfielders, or whether you go big in midfield or just big at the back. That's a question you need to weigh out for yourselves.
Absolutely, and you hit the nail on the head. So Gaurav Mehta asks, what's the best backline for the rest of the season? And then you also have Tommy Tran saying, are we trending towards the big, going big at the back for the home stretch from Liverpool, Chelsea, Man City, Arsenal, Tottenham? So if you were wildcarding today, Ted, what's your back 5?
If I was wildcarding today, I would give a lot for a wildcard today, by the way, because I've been tinkering a lot and going, blimey, I need to do 7 or 8 transfers to fix this team, and that's awful. But we're loading up with all of these big hitters. We have Liverpool, City, Chelsea, Arsenal, Spurs, all to fit in our sides. It's crazy. So I think the current template that I've come up with at the end of those 7 or 8 transfers involves Trent, Laporte and Reece James in a back 3, and then Salah, Saka, Foden, Havertz and the likes of Maddison or Barnes, and then a Lacazette and Kane up front with fodder like Gelhardt. So that's what I quite like, but equally so you could go away, you don't have to go Havertz, you could go Robertson instead and have a cheaper guy in midfield. I think there's a variety of options, but I think that's probably what I would edge towards.
Yeah, I think you made an excellent point in terms of you have to hedge between your 4th mid versus your 4th defender if you want to go bigger in either of them. I mean, personally, I would I would just think the defenders are so much more value this year. I mean, I do trust Foden. I love him. I'm a little bit more lukewarm on Havertz, but I can see the appeal for going to those guys. Personally, my backline would be the four guys we see here, which is Trent, Cancelo, James, and Robertson. You have them, you keep them for the rest of the season. They will, whenever they will play, they will get you points. So, I mean, I was talking to Sam last week, and James has been my best transfer in. I got him on the Game Week 7 wildcard when he went mad for like 4 games. When everyone else went for him, then he went on a string of 1-pointers, and then I got him for the Game Week 28. So that, for me, a backline is just more dependable. The counter argument to that is there's Doherty, who's putting up great numbers. Obviously not defensively as good, but attacking wise, who's putting up great numbers. You have the Arsenal guys, again, defensively very reliable. Tierney is less attacking this season, or at least more recently, but still, I mean, dependable guy. Or you go White. You can make an argument for going White and Doherty as your two very solid 4th and 5th defenders, and then put more money in midfield. So I see both sides of it.
For me, the back line that you've just named, Alexander-Arnold, Cancelo, Reece James and Robertson is just so good on paper. It just seems like every time we talk about Doherty or Tierney or whoever, it seems like those players are just the temporary ones that we have to play before we get in these really good premium defenders. So they don't even come close, do they really? And let's not forget that Aston Villa have some really, really good fixtures from game week 34. So if you can hold on to the likes of Digne, who, he's 5.1 million, he's quite a lot to keep, but if you can keep him until game week 34, then he's a decent option to hold on. Because I think Aston Villa have potential double game week around that time as well, don't they, Pras?
They do. I think, and it'll be a good one as well. In 34 or 35. I mean, if it's 35, it's Burnley will be involved on one of them, which in itself makes it very good. They play Burnley again in 35, and I think they have another pretty easy game. So I think Villa is a team that people will go for. This was my thing. I'll come to my bus team later, but I've ended up selling Dean. But if I had the luxury, and it didn't include selling Trent, for example, I would have definitely liked to keep Dean. And people with Ramsey, don't just jump on Gordon that easily, because look, Ramsey is going to have a very nice double coming up in 34 or 35. And Villa actually have Leicester away in 34. They have Norwich at home in game week 35 and possibly Burnley. And then in game week 36, they again have Burnley and probably Liverpool. So Villa's fixtures are very, very good from game week 34 onwards.
But as you said, it's a complete luxury in able to keep Coutinho or Digne. They've just quite a lot of money, and you want some of these better players. So, yeah.
Exactly. Excellent. So that's on defenders. I see one comment from FPL Trini, Nick, who's very active on Twitter as well. He's asking, would you go Laporte instead of Cancelo? So I think Ted answered this. He's leaning towards this. I am not. So there's no one answer that we can give you, Nick. It's more dependent on what you can do with that money if you save it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I've got Lacazette in my team, but I could equally have Weghorst instead, and that would mean a Laporte to Cancelo upgrade. It really just depends what your team structure is like, and making unnecessary moves can give you the money to get Cancelo. But if you don't have that luxury, then Laporte is perfectly fine.
Excellent. Okay, let's move on to the next topic then. So hopefully we covered defenders to a certain extent. I mean, I can see, for example, Tommy Gunn is asking, would you take hits to catch up with the defensive template? I think there is no template right now. You will not see these guys at very high ownership right now. If you can get to them, fine. If you can get them, because of your team structure earlier, fine. But if you can't, it's not the end of the world. You don't have to be scared of the defensive template. Not many people have the big defenders yet. We'll see my bus team later. Okay, so the next topic is, and I was surprised initially to see this, which is a lot of people were saying, shall we just ditch Salah? Salah looks tired. He hasn't scored I think an open play goal for 6 or 7 game weeks, I think since Norwich, that he got in that double game week. He's only scored penalties or otherwise not been involved. He's obviously missed the games from AFCON as well. But question from FPL Overthinker, he can do Salah to Mane to enable KDB and Kane. And there's not too much, well, basically he'll go Salah to Mane now and then Mane to KDB. So there's not too much difference between Liverpool front two in the last 6 game weeks, and the price differential will really get him another premium defender. So question for him, FPL MD, KDB over Salah for the rest of the season. What do you think? And I have somebody whose name I can't pronounce. Would you consider KDB over Salah for the next 3 game weeks, given the fixtures, possible rotation for Salah in game week 31? Extra funds can make a defender to James or Cancelo. So everyone basically has similar ideas. Do you want Salah plus a Saiz plus a KDB or a James or Cancelo? So very interesting question. Your early thoughts, Ted?
My early thoughts when I read this was going to be a topic was going, what? How is anyone going to consider that? But I mean, we've got a graphic up here on screen which shows the comparison between KDB and Salah. KDB is actually on the left, and Salah's on the right. And the Scout comparison tool suggests that KDB is a 3 times better option than Salah, which is kind of crazy. And I think quite a lot of the stats that they measure that on are things like starts and sub-ons and all of these sort of other measures. But when you look at the XG that Salah has, I think it's like 9 point something compared to 2 point something for KDB. That sort of puts everything into perspective. But having said that, going back to the questions, there is some credence in some of these. We are really strapped for cash at the moment. We want to fund all of these premium players. We probably have a squad of 14 or 15 legitimate players rather than fodder, because we've been bench boosting over the last few weeks. We've been trying to navigate some blank game weeks. We're going to try and move away from that by bringing some fodder in. But every transfer you make to bring in fodder seems like a wasted one, doesn't it? So we need some cash to spend to upgrade to all of these premium options. I'm not sure it's like the best idea in the world to go without Salah. I can't believe I'm saying this. But I kind of get where they're coming from. Personally, it's a big no-no. The fact that you can captain Salah most weeks, even with his lack of form recently, is just, it's comforting to me. Like, Salah's the main man at Liverpool. He's the main source of points. KDB is not the main source of points at Man City. And when those teams are going head-to-head for the rest of the season, I'd much rather have Salah in my team.
Yep, fully agree with you. Look, this is the thing. When you're reaching endgame, you can't fault anyone for going with any strategy. I mean, last game week of last season, I was, I think, 16 points behind top 10K. And basically, I just went for Mane against Salah's 180% captaincy. Last game week of the season, Mane scored a brace. Salah had a blank. I was two points short of top 10K, but still, in the end game, if you need to chase, if you need to get to a goal where you have to, it's fine. But you should know that this is a high risk, high reward strategy. Salah will be heavily owned, and KDB has an ownership of less than 1% right now. So you're basically putting all your chips in. If it works, then you'll fly. If it doesn't, then you'll probably double your rank. So basically, that's the simple way of looking at it. If we come to the table itself, so it's a little bit of, like you mentioned, when you look at it on the face of it, KDB has much better key metrics, and the key metrics are, passes, chances created, but ultimately it comes down to how much XGI do you have, because all of these things should come down to what is your output. And the output, Salah has started. So I'm talking about the table now for the listeners. Salah has had 8 starts since game week 18. KDB has had 11. And in that time, Salah has an XG of 9. KDB has an XG of 2.4. So you're basically getting the guy who in 3 less starts has 3 times more goal threat. And basically with that comes, it encapsulates everything. The talismanic nature of him, the fact that Liverpool are an attacking team. And mind you, this season, Liverpool have been more attacking than Man City. We tend to think of Liverpool as this machine, which are efficient. But this is the first season where Liverpool are doing much better, even from an attacking point of view. So look, you've got a nailed guy on pens for a team that is the most attacking team in the league. It really screams as overthinking. Unless he's injured, unless you get a credible leak before Watford that Salah is out, fine. But you're just basically playing with fire if you do that. That's the ultimate.
Yeah, I mean, our job in FPL is to predict what is going to happen in the future, right? And we're looking at Salah and KDB here. We're looking at what's happened. They've both got 5 goals in the last, since game week 18, this table. So the type of chances that Salah has compared to KDB, like Salah, all of his chances are big chances. They're much easier to convert. KDB has like 8 small chance goals this season with a conversion rate of 5%. So that is much less likely to happen going forwards than Salah with penalties, with big chances. I'd much rather bank my money on Salah converting those goals compared to a KDB. And it kind of shocked me when I saw that KDB only had 3 assists this year. I could not believe that. And I was like, right, are City scoring fewer goals this year? And I actually looked through the last few seasons, just looking at how many goals they've scored in each match. And the proportion is exactly the same as last year. The same amount of 1 goal scored in a match, same amount of 2, same amount of 3, same amount of 4. So it's not like City is scoring fewer goals. KDB is just not. I know he's been injured for an extent of the season, has to be said, but 3 assists is just nowhere near what we would expect from him.
Yeah, I mean, he's just not as central. I mean, that's how good City are. That Bernardo Silva is having a stormer of a season. Whenever Sterling plays or Foden plays, I mean, those guys are doing exceptionally well. Whenever Mahrez plays, the chances are being created from everybody. It's not just KDB like it was 2 years ago, where he was the guy creating, giving, putting in that cross, which Aguero was getting at the end of, or Sterling was getting at the end of. I just think that the whole format has changed. So he's fine. I think KDB is a great option. We talked about last week in the video that, in game week 36 for the double, you probably want KDB over a Kane, maybe, but Kane is on fire himself. So look, we're in a position we haven't been in all season where there's 3 premiums putting their hand up and saying, look, we want to be in your team. And I think we both agree right now, probably Salah is over KDB.
Yeah, 100%. Ignore the recent form. Salah is a world-class player. He's going to get that form back, especially when Liverpool are in a massive title race battle with Man City.
Yeah. And the only one thing I would say for KDB, a lot of people, if Salah is out of Watford, KDB, the big game player, I mean, he does tend to, in my memory, I have so many games where KDB has come up with a 1-0 win against a Chelsea or a Liverpool, where it's KDB's goal just outside the box or him making a late run. He is a big game player. So you back a KDB, would you, over Salah in a City-Liverpool game?
It's a really good question. I mean, he scored 2 against Man United in the Manchester derby recently. That just says it all. Yeah. I don't know. You could equally say that about Salah at the start of the season when he was on fire. He was scoring against everyone, Chelsea, City. Obviously got a penalty against City. And that's a huge string to his bow, the penalty options, because there's a huge amount of Liverpool players that can win penalties for their side. So it's a really difficult question. Yes, I think KDB is a big game player, but I'm not 100% sure that we can rely or even predict that that's going to happen more regularly than Salah would be at the end of a big chance. So yeah, I'm still going to back Salah.
I think we're in agreement here. We can move to the next topic. And the next topic is a very interesting one, and it plays into something you were talking about, Ted, which is if you're not going big at the back, or you may not have the funds, or you may have a different preference. We've all been talking about City and Chelsea picks in midfield, and the names get thrown out, which is Foden, Havertz, Mount. So Luke, which is at FPL Luke 23, he's simply asking Foden, Havertz, or Mount. And FPL Anfield is asking best Liverpool assets, 3 assets from Liverpool, and the 3 Man City assets to own. And then Dan Parsons is asking, are Chelsea or City the higher priority in terms of their attackers? So you mentioned that you're looking at Havertz and Foden. So I'm going to put you on the spot and say, if you only had space for one, who is the priority and why?
If it only had space for one, I would start with Havertz over the next 3 and then switch to Foden from game week 34 when City's fixtures just explode. That I'm really scared without going any City assets from game week 34 because they play some of the worst sides in the league. Whereas Havertz is in really good form at the moment. He scored 4 in, I think, his last 3 matches. All of them have been big chances because he's playing as that false 9. He's been really efficient at scoring those goals. Yes, there is an argument to say that he could play in the Champions League games and Lukaku could come in the Premier League. And that is definitely one downside. And in the back of my head, I'm going, do I need to prioritise Havertz because of that worry? I think sometimes we overthink these things in this game because we have been on the bad experience in the past when suffering for these. But that's an outcome. We need to make logical decisions, and ignoring an informed player who has decent fixtures just because of a hunch of rotation, I don't know whether that's completely optimal. So yeah, I would go Havertz first and then Foden. Do you concur with that? What do you think about the Havertz into rotation worry? Do you think we're silly for thinking like that?
Chelsea play Brentford, obviously in game week 31. Then the midweek they have Real Madrid. Then they play Southampton game week 32. Then they have the Madrid away tie in between game week 22 and 33. Then they have the Crystal Palace FA Cup semi-final. Then they have Arsenal. So this is basically the schedule that they have until end of game week 33. Now, I would expect Havertz to definitely play Arsenal, definitely play Madrid, the two Madrid games. Maybe Lukaku, and we're just guessing here, right? I mean, maybe Lukaku gets the Palace FA Cup game. So then you are saying Havertz will play at least Arsenal plus one of Brentford and Southampton. That's basically it. And if you get 2 games out of him, I think that's good enough. The good thing with Havertz is he's going to either play up top or he also has space on the wings. But now that Ziyech is back, Mount is fit. I think I also saw Hudson-Odoi fit. Pulisic is fit. I mean, he scored that wonder goal over the international break. It's a difficult one, but I don't think we can predict rotation. I think standalone, I do agree with you that if he plays, he'll have a better output than a Foden and even a Mount. So if I was to rank the 3. But then if you go to the table now, just bringing again for the listeners, we've presented here for the whole season, basically all midfielders under 8.5 million. And this is XGI per 90 because there's a little bit of rotation with these guys. They don't always start. So we've looked at per 90 numbers. And Minamino, we're going to ignore. He's on top. We've obviously got, on a per 90 basis, this guy just comes on, scores a couple of goals in his 30-minute cameos. So the next one is Jota. We all wish that we had the Jota comfort blanket, but I think Diaz has changed that. Fit Firmino has changed that. So we had our party with Jota. You have Gundogan, again, a minute's risk. So let's move past the top 3. After that, you have Foden at number 4, an XGI per 90 of 0.67, which is actually very good. He's got 10 goals per assist for the season. Then you have Mount, who's got 15 goals per assist for the season, but a slightly lower XGI than Mount. You then have Rafinha at 0.56. You have Saka at 0.54. Bowen at 0.52, Grealish, Martinelli at almost 0.5. And then way down, I think number 13 is Havertz at 0.46. So this is, I mean, there's not much between a 0.46 per 90 and a 0.58 for Mount. But the fact of the matter is, just from a statistical point of view, Mount is doing better. So he's on free kicks, on some corners. He's now fit. Why not Mount over Havertz?
I don't know. I love Mason Mount because he scored that hat-trick and an assist in one game I owned him earlier in the season after suffering such tremendous rotation and injury woes with him. So he really, really compensated with me in that game. But I mean, that's probably saying it all. He really does earn his FPL points in bursts, and he's not a consistent performer. He hasn't been for a very long time at Chelsea, and I thought that would change actually with Lukaku coming into the side. I thought that Mount's creativity would be rewarded and converted a lot more than it has been. So yes, I think Mount's a fantastic player, but I think Havertz playing at a number 9, where he's going to get more big chances, I would always opt for Havertz right now. Obviously, I could get proven wrong, but I think, yeah, Mount hasn't proven the consistency or is in actually that good a form at the moment. So, yeah.
And do you think their X minutes are similar? Do you consider Mount to be more nailed?
It's really difficult to say. I'm definitely not the person to ask about Chelsea because they've got so many forwards options to really cater for this really hectic schedule, like City, like Liverpool too, like all the top teams, the Pulisic, the Ziyech, the Hudson-Odois, the Saul. These guys can all come in and do a job in a mid-link fixture in the Premier League. So I think the expected minutes is probably about the same, to be completely honest. I think Mount is probably better in his position, more important in his position than maybe Havertz is as a number 9. And I'm not sure Havertz really can be versatile and go into a different position to accommodate a Lukaku or a Werner. So I think Mount probably does have the advantage there, but then when Havertz does play, I think he's a better option.
I agree with a lot of that. I think so. These guys at Above Average FPL, they did a pod on Monday where they actually looked at the data for these teams, these top teams, top 6 teams from game week 1 to game week 30. They obviously had a more nuanced version where they compared it to earlier seasons as well. But I think the one takeaway I had from this is on an attacking point of view, there's 2 tiers. Tier 1, City and Liverpool are well above everyone in terms of their data for just attacking output. And then you have a very similar tier. So Chelsea, I would put more as similar to Arsenal, similar to Spurs even United. They're all very similar in terms of attacking data over the season. So when we think of a Havertz, we have to compare him. Is he worth it compared to a Saka, a Martinelli, I think United assets are too expensive, and that's a problem. Maybe Sancho, and then a Foden. And that's where I think it comes into it. We think of Chelsea as a top 3 team, but here they're a tier 2 team. In defense, it's the opposite, where Chelsea, City, Liverpool are all elite defenses. And so you can compare a James to a Cancelo, to a Trent, to a Robertson. But I think here, this is why I sort of prefer a Foden. Now, I do understand your point, which you mentioned, which is City just have so many players and, they just have so many attackers that will get the points. But if you close your eyes and look at XGI data and you say, despite all of that, Foden is just a little bit more involved. Ultimately, for me, that's why he would be the number 1 pick. But a lot of FPL comes down to prediction of minutes. And these are all midfielders that may or may not play the game. You'll always be looking out for that team sheet and say, is he in the starting 11? This is the skill in FPL. You have to make that prediction. There's no right answer, right?
So I think one element we haven't really talked about is when we manage our FPL teams, we're talking about priorities at the moment, who to transfer in first. We've had a lot of doubts here in this segment about expected minutes. So maybe the best option is to hold on to our players like Rafinha, who has 2 very decent fixtures in Southampton and I think it's Watford, and then blanks in 33. So you can get rid of him in after 33, but maybe bring Foden and Havertz or whoever you want from this list from game week 33, from game week 34, where there's plenty of double game weeks on the horizon for these teams, and prioritise maybe some really nailed on defenders instead. I think that's probably what I'm edging towards. But nevertheless, I think these guys are really going to be important for us in the next few weeks. But we can't get them all right now. We have to order them, right?
Indeed. I think I completely agree with you. And you saw that the Rafinhas, Martinelli's, Saka's. Kulusevski isn't here because this is obviously, he hasn't. I think I filtered for 10 games or something. So you won't see your Kulusevskis or other good midfielders that have played limited amount of minutes like Diaz. But they're all there. So I think there's a lot of options in midfield. We're blessed this season for all the complaints we have about the forwards. We're blessed in the midfield area. So we have to be very smart about the people we're going for, because you are losing an opportunity cost for someone else. So you need to think about really who are the guys you go for. And I think option value of time, which is just waiting for that week, if you're holding on to one of these assets, is probably the right play.
I really want Minamino as my 3rd Liverpool man, by the way.
We wish. Yeah. I mean, not from a Liverpool fan's point of view, but if we didn't have Jotas and Diaz's of the world, then Minamino is the natural choice.
I think he's 7th on the list out of 7 forward spots. So yeah, right, unfortunate. Right.
Excellent. So we leave it there on the midfield chat. I think you think your order is Havertz, Foden, Mount. I think for me, it's Foden, Havertz, Mount. Is that fair?
I would agree with you if I didn't have the opportunity to go Havertz and then Foden. If I just had to pick one for the rest of the season, yeah, I agree with you. It would be Foden.
Okay, excellent. All right, moving on to the next one. And this is a very short one. It's a simple point that we wanted to make. So there were actually a few people, and kudos to the Twitter community, a lot of people who are engaged FPL managers. So many people are in the top 100. So I test Dave, shout out to him. He reached out and he said, I'm in the top 100. who do I take for a punt if I want to win FPL? And that's a good question. I mean, why not? And these are the people who should be looking at maybe going a KDB instead of a Salah, maybe selling Trent, because no one's going to care if you end up 700, but people will know if you finish in the top 10 or even win it. So it's a simple one. It is ridiculous how low owned Man City assets are. I mean, this is from Live FPL. Look at the ownership for City defenders. The highest is Cancelo, as you'd expect, about 16%. After him, nobody is over 1% owned. Laporte is 0.88%, Stones 0.6%, everyone else is 0 or just about 0. Edison himself is 0.06. Now, I'm not suggesting Edison is the best keeper, but basically, if you're even one Cancelo, you're way ahead of everyone. And now some will get this week, but if you've got two City defenders, man, I mean, you've got the best defense, and that's a differential in itself. You don't even need to force it. Then come to midfield. You've got Foden as the highest owned midfielder from City at 0.6%. I mean, it's incredible that the leaders of the league, just because they didn't have any doubles and they had a blank in game week 30, you could get a Foden now. You could get a KDB who's 0.2% in ownership, and basically that's how you will rise in the ranks. And forwards, I'm not going to talk about. There are none, but everyone else is basically 0.2 or below. I mean, does that shock you? I mean, did you expect this?
This is absolutely bonkers. It's not bonkers when you think about it, that Man City has not been on the front of our minds with all of the double game weeks that all of these teams have had in previous weeks. And obviously they didn't play in 30. So it doesn't surprise me from that perspective. And it also emphasises to me that even though in my head I'm going, I need lots of Man City assets immediately, the effective ownerships here really just calm me down and go, you're not going to fall behind. There's plenty of people, almost 99% of people in a similar rank to you are probably in the same position. You're just going to whittle away and get them when you can, and it's all going to be fine. I remember when Cancelo was around 97% effective ownership. Foden was around 60, 70%. That's when you needed to worry. That's when you were going to worry where the red arrows were going to come. You don't need to worry about those yet. Yes, these effective ownerships are going to rise over the next 2 or 3 game weeks, but I don't think you need to rush. And that's really nice and calming to think about.
Totally with you. Look, I see some comments on the chat that it's logical why they're so lowly owned. There's been, limited doubles. There's a lot of rotation. But look, we've always gone for City assets. That's the challenge. You have to go for the City assets despite the rotation because they just score more goals. They're more productive. They are the best defensive team in the league. They're the second best attacking team in the league. And if you can play Pep Roulette and you can win, then that's how you climb in the ranks. So we're trying to answer the question on if you really wanted to accelerate for the last 8 weeks, there's no team other than City that you should look at. Forget about the fact that they play Liverpool next week. Just punt on them. I think later, as I put out a tweet a couple of days ago, go for KDB for the rest of the season. You'll definitely get points.
I think the order here by each position is particularly appropriate because I think, you've got Edison, you've got Cancelo, Laporte, you've got Foden and De Bruyne. What do they all have in common? They have been the highest participants, the highest expected minutes for these City sides. And people have it right. If you're going to go for City options, you've got to go for the highest expected minutes. Foden has been really, really prevalent in that side over the season. I think at 7.8 million, I think he is now. He's like the most obvious option for me to go alongside one City defender or even 2. But yeah, really, really sensible. I wouldn't be going for crazy pet roulette options like Mahrez, who, yes, he's great, but you're never going to know when he's going to play. And that's kind of a cop-out because there's plenty of good predictors out there. Luke and Emma on Twitter, they've done a really good job predicting Pep this year. So if you want to pay pet roulette, yeah, get involved in all of that. But if you want an easy life, choose one of those 5 players.
Exactly. I think you made an excellent point there. You don't have to be scared of City assets. A lot of people are selling Trent for Cancelo because everyone is buying Cancelo. He's not going to be that high owned. So go for him if you think he's the better choice and you want to keep him long term and you have no other issues. So let's move on from here. I think we can go next to a topic again, which was popular in our Q&A. So Inglorious FPL, he says, I plan to bench boost in 33. I currently have David De Gea and Ramsdale. I obviously want to cut one of them down. Who should it be? Kif says Pope, Pickford, or Schmeichel for the rest of the season. And Craig Smith asks, who would the best two keepers be on a wildcard 31 or a wildcard 34? So what we've done for the listeners is we've basically just jotted down who are the popular keepers and when do they expect to double. So you have Ramsdale, who is expected to double in 33 and 36, Pickford in 31 and 36 and 37, Schmeichel in 33, 36 and 37, Mendy in 35 and 36, Pope in 31, 33 and 34. So a couple of things jumped out to me. Number one, if you are on wildcard, one idea is you just go Pope now until 34 and you switch to Mendy and you get a double in 31, 33, 34, 35, 36. I mean, ridiculous. The other option is you already have Ramsdale and you want to pair him with somebody else. And basically what you want to do is you want to avoid game week 33 and 36 because you'll definitely play Ramsdale in those weeks. The only week where you won't play Ramsdale is when somebody doubles. And so for me, the option is Pickford over Schmeichel here, because Pickford, you'll get one extra week, which is this week, by the way, when Ramsdale already has an injury doubt. And you'll get game week 37 as a week where basically the 2 weeks where you won't want to play Ramsdale. Schmeichel doesn't really work with Ramsdale, but if you wanted to go Pickford and Schmeichel, so let's say you were on wildcard and you wanted to go for two keepers, I think you'll get, if with Pickford and Schmeichel, you'll get a double in 31, 33, 36 and 37. Only issue being they both double in 36 and 37. But if you're on a bench boost, maybe that works. So this was very simply, and I know it's not just about the doubles, but the fact of the matter is doubles are just volume of shots that keepers get, and keepers tend to do well in doubles. So your thoughts on this, Ted?
Yeah, I think if I was wildcarding, it would be Pope. Pope and wow, that Pope to Mendy move looks really nice, but it's a bit of a luxury, it has to be said. Like we want to avoid making goalkeeper transfers at the best of times, but you know, if you're going to target five double game weeks, that's pretty cool. And it means you can also, you know, not have a second goalkeeper and spend the cash elsewhere. Another goalkeeper that hasn't been mentioned here is Dubravka. Obviously, he has a double in 33, but then nowhere else. So when you're going to dovetail him with the likes of Ramsdale, isn't particularly useful. So it's really interesting. Something I haven't really thought about, actually, because I own Ramsdale and Dubravka and kind of want to avoid making goalkeeper transfers. But it just shows that if you do have the luxury of making one, you can really benefit from plenty of double game weeks here.
Yeah, I mean, people are looking at, in this exact spot, are looking at a Pope move because if you had a Ramsdale and a Pope, now that's very expensive. But just for argument's sake, I mean, you would get Pope's double in 31 and the Pope double in 34, and then you play Ramsdale for the rest of the weeks. And the other thing with Pope is you get the Norwich game as well in 32 in case Ramsdale isn't ready yet. So I think it's pretty neat. But ultimately, I think we have to emphasize Everton, Leicester, Burnley are terrible teams. And do you really want to use those out of those 8 precious transfers, one additional transfer on upgrading a Dubravka? ? And by the way, I think Dubravka is back in training anyway, so you may not have a problem at all.
It's interesting though that forecasting double game weeks, that even if you took a hit to transfer your second goalkeeper to the likes of Pope, you're going to earn that -4 back with some of the appearance points, the extra appearance points that he gets, and presumably save points as well. But yeah, like you said, how much expectation can we have for clean sheets from certainly some of these? I mean, Pickford, Everton have been dreadful. Even Schmeichel at Leicester, they haven't been keeping the clean sheets. Pope has a chance of keeping it down to a low-scoring game, but his double in 31 involves City. How many? It could be a negative point for all we know. But yeah, it's a really interesting topic. And, you know, if you're really on the upside chase, I would consider maybe taking a hit for trying to optimize a goalkeeper rotation with the double game weeks.
Yeah, I think the whole don't make a goalkeeper transfer goes out of the window when it's multiple double game weeks being involved. So I wouldn't, I mean, personally, if I was in wildcard, my pick would be I would go Pope and Foster and basically just play Pope and then look to upgrade him to Mendy, even if it's for a hit. Because again, people will not like it. But you remember from last week, we mentioned that Chelsea might have a very cramped up double in game week 37. Who's going to play both games in 2 games in 3 days? Probably the goalkeeper. Maybe even not him. I understand Kepa could play one, but if there's anyone, it could be the goalkeeper. So for a short period of time, I don't hate the Mendy move as well, because we've talked about the fact that Rudiger may not be as good value as a Laporte or anybody else. If you really wanted to tap into Chelsea, you probably have no other choice than going for a James plus a Mendy plus a Havertz. I don't think there's a fourth player.
Very difficult, but it's a really good point about the security of starts from Mendy, because Chelsea's last 4 or 5 game weeks are absolutely fantastic. Yeah. And you don't want to be victim of rotation. So I kind of like it, to be honest. You're kind of making me think Maverick thoughts, Pras. It's awful.
That's the idea. We try to kind of make people question their decisions. And then, I guess if people can come away with these streams with some ideas, that's job done.
Absolutely.
All right. So there's one question in the chat. Mark is asking, is Ramsdale confirmed out? No, we don't know that yet. It could simply be an international break injury. We haven't heard anything as far as I'm aware. So obviously look out for press conferences. Even if he's out, please don't sell Ramsdale. He's the best goalkeeper in the game. And, I don't take views, such radical views easily, but Ramsdale is the best goalkeeper for his price in the game, because he gets saves, he gets bonus, he's playing for an elite defense, and he's cheap, especially people who had him early on. So sell the other keeper if you have to, if Ramsdale is out, not Ramsdale.
I think if they're both out, if they're both confirmed out, it kind of puts further credence into taking a hit to move to some of these rotations for the double game week. So yeah, I'd be even more tempted in that situation. But let's see what the managers say.
Excellent, fair. So that's it on keepers. Let's move to the next topic, and now we're coming close to the hour mark. This was meant to be short, so I apologize, Ted. I speak too much. I'm sorry.
It's all right. So, it's been a great discussion. So yeah, happy to continue on. Let's go.
All right, let's do a few macro, and after macro we'll just do bus teams if that's fine. So on macro, I have to emphasize, if you have questions about Wildcard 31, Wildcard 33, Free Hit 33, Free Hit 36, please watch last week's video. It's very relevant. We went through this topic in a lot of detail. But there's a couple of questions that I found interesting that I think we could just debate. So the first one was on Wildcard. Now, neither of us are on Wildcard, but take it easy is the poster. He's asking, in the previous pod, we spoke about a Game Week 34 Wildcard. Why is a 34 wildcard preferred over a 35 wildcard, which can be used in conjunction with a 36 bench boost? I think that's an interesting point. I'll take this one simply saying that, look, there's no 1 week. You have to see how your team is looking. The reason people are looking at 34 is so that they can dead end the team to 33. So if you're not basically free hitting in game week 33, you can do a Kane to Ronaldo if you wanted. You can basically sell some key players, even selling Salah and Trent we talked about. You can probably sell them and then immediately get them back on 34. So that's why 34 is slightly better. But for only bench boost, I think definitely you try to wildcard as close to the bench boost as possible. Do you agree, Ted?
I think the Game Week 34 wildcard is probably even a little bit better than what you were saying, because you can jump on board some of the big fixture swings as well, particularly for Man City, who play Watford and then Leeds and then Newcastle in 36, coupled with an extra fixture. So I think that extra sort of fixture, Watford at home for City, when we saw how low owned they were in an earlier section, to get 3 City on a Game Week 34 wildcard is going to put you way ahead of everyone else.
Yeah, agreed. I see Sonaldo in the chat. Hello, Sonaldo. Good to have you. I mean, you're still not sleeping, but very good to have you in the chat as well. I'm going to go to the next question, which is by Kostub Parthvardhan. And he's saying, shall I play suboptimal 31 to 33 and then wildcard in 34 just for a better bench boost? Or shall I wildcard in 31 and attack 31 to 33? I think attack, right?
I don't mind the early wild card, to be honest, because we know the bigger teams are going to have some decent doubles in 36 and 37. So if you don't mind ignoring some of the weaker teams that double in 33, I think it's perfectly legitimate. And I would be very tempted to do that if I was in your position.
Right. I agree. Early, don't be afraid of an early wild card, man. I mean, this year, this whole bench boost play. I mean, we've got good benches every week. I mean, if somebody wanted to bench boost this week by selling Trent, they could probably get, take a hit and do a bench boost. I mean, you've got pretty much everyone has 2 playing keepers. Pretty much everyone has a squad of 14 good players. You can do it any week. Don't stress too much. It's the main team. Main team gets you more points than those 4 idiots on your bench on one game week. I mean, don't fixate over that. And that's the strategy. Focus on the 11 for the weeks leading up to it. Of course, if you don't need to and your ideal team can be set up, you'll make a lot of profit if you wildcard close to it. But that shouldn't be driving your strategy. So completely agree. Craig Smith is asking, is there merit to wildcard 33? Now, Craig, the problem in wildcard 33 is you'll be basically tempted to get in on a lot of doublers. And those doublers are not great teams with not great fixtures in the future. So I think this is an easy one. Wildcard 33 isn't the way to go, unless you're basically going to load up on the single game weekers, in which case, why not 32 or 34? So you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And it was exactly the same answer that I was planning to say. So yeah, exactly. If you wildcard in 33, you'd almost have to just get City, Chelsea and Liverpool and whoever, some of the big teams. But yeah, why not do it in 31 or 32? So yeah, I mean, 31 would even be better because City and Liverpool have Burnley and Watford. I know they play each other in 32, and that's probably why you're suggesting 33. But yeah, do it now if you really want to.
Right, I agree. Okay, FPL Escapades is asking quite a lot, and this is something you raised as well, Ted. Quite a lot of us own roughly 2 or 3 out of Rafinha, Coutinho, Ramsey, Cody, Saiz, Jimenez, who blank in game week 33. Would you classify them as an immediate sell or wait? I'll put that to you.
It really depends on the particular player you're talking about. Obviously, Jimenez, who is suspended for the next game, is an immediate sell for me, 100%. You've got the likes of Veghorst if you really want to go there, or you downgrade him to fodder, and you've got plenty of cash to upgrade your defenders and midfielders to some of these premium options. Rafinha is a hold for me for the next 2. Absolutely fantastic fixtures. He's been missing a lot, but at least he's getting in the right positions. I can expect points for him in the next couple. The other guys, the Villa and the Wolves defenders, they're a little bit more tricky. I would probably prioritise the Wolves defenders up to a premium defender first. If you can keep Digne and Coutinho or Ramsey until game week 34, then that would be a real luxury. Otherwise, those guys are an easy sell as well. Up to a premium mid or a premium defender.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
I would agree. I would also agree that Wolves are probably the priority to lose, even though I'm, mind you, in game week 34, they play Burnley, and game week 35, they play Brighton at home. They also have Villa now and Newcastle away. So it's not an emergency sell as well. But I think in priority, I agree with you, because the problem is Wolves' defensive numbers are just very poor. I mean, this is the reason in game week 30, I started Ramsdale over Sa, because I didn't trust Wolves to even keep a clean sheet against Leeds. Ultimately, obviously, Sa auto sub because thank you, Ramsdale. But I just don't trust the Wolves defense at all. And if you're not trusting that defense, Jimenez is out anyway until game week 34. Those are guys that can leave your team. I don't think they need to stay. And Villa is a luxury, like you said. If you can keep them, keep them. Otherwise, get rid of them.
I think the Wolves guys, their defence is sort of unravelling a little bit, because we've seen earlier in the season they've had great defensive stats in terms of the goals that they've conceded, very few, but they've had a really high expected goals conceded, and they've massively overperformed that. And earlier you could sort of say, yes, they've just got a knack for keeping clean sheets, but recently that's completely been reversed, and they're performing as their expected numbers are suggesting. And it just completely puts you off if they don't have the knack anymore for keeping clean sheets. They're a sell for me, even with the good fixtures.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think we're at the end. I will take one last question, which I saw in the chat. And, ironically, we have a double game week next week, and we haven't talked about a single player from the double game week. shall we spend one question on if somebody wanted to get one player from Everton, Burnley in any position, who would that be for you?
That's a really tough question because there's a lot of people going Veghorst this week, and I get it. But I want to move money out of my forward line into midfielders and defenders. Hugely what we've been talking about this video. So to move some money in with Veghorst, I know he's not exactly expensive, and I know he's got 3 double game weeks in the next 4 or 5 weeks. I would be like playing huge devil's advocate here and suggesting going for like Anthony Gordon just from the fact that he can enable some of these other moves. But I'm just really not feeling this double game week whatsoever. And I think if you want to avoid it completely, which is probably what I'm going to do, then I think it's completely fine as well.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think my perspective is if you're getting a player that releases some funds to enable a better player, go for it. So, for example, we'll come to my bus team. I was able to release some money from the forward line, put it into defense. So for me, that justified a Weghorst. If your goalkeepers are injured, both of them, and you had the money, going for a Pope is justified. I slightly favor Burnley to Everton only because of general trust in the team. I just don't think Lampard is doing enough with Everton. It may change. I mean, he could get better. I do agree with you. If you were to go Everton, Gordon is the only guy. Issue again is the midfield slot is a very crowded slot. Are you really going to waste a spot on Gordon? Because, for example, if you had Ramsey, and Mihir is in the chat, I was talking to Mihir earlier today, he's looking to go Ramsey to Gordon. But then I pointed out that actually Ramsey will himself have a very, very good double in 34, in 35 or 35. Are you just going to be doing Gordon to Ramsey and Ramsey to Gordon and wasting your precious transfers in doing that? So at least with Burnley, you get them. You get a double, Norwich, double. Just play the minutes. You get something. Is it worth a transfer? Maybe not. But like I said, if you can release some money, maybe take out a bad player or a non-player for a player that has a lot of minutes, fair. I think that's doable. But there is a trap, and you'll see with my team, I'm benching good players to play Weghorst, and I'm not happy. I mean, it's not something that I'm happy doing, but it's a trap we all fall into, and we keep playing the game. And I'm thinking to myself, he's playing Everton. Everton are really poor. Weghorst has not played any minutes in the international break. He's ready to go. So that's where you go. But if I had to basically pick one, let's say I was on a free hit in Game Week 31. For me, the number one would be Pope. Would you agree with that? I mean, he would probably be, even despite the fact that he's playing City, he's in for a few saves and he'll probably keep a clean sheet, or maybe against Everton. Or do you think Gordon is probably better?
No, I'd forgotten about Pope when I was giving my answer, actually. And I think that's, the conversation we were having earlier about the goalkeeper rotation, maximising those double game weeks. I think, I would probably favour him over even Weghorst or Gordon. When you were saying about moving from Ramsey to Gordon, you could throw Dewsbury Hall in there as well. So there's one thing worse than goalkeeper transfers, and that's budget defender transfers. You don't want to be wasting time with those. But if you brought in the likes of Gordon, you would have to commit to playing like 5-4-1 or 4-4-2, and with such value in midfield, it's a real downside, isn't it? So if you want to maximise the double game weeks, I think Burnley want to target with Weghorst and Pope, but really, really reticent about bringing Weghorst in, even with the additional fixtures. So, if you want to play a differential game and maximise those double game weeks at the back, at the goalkeeper, when we went through it, I really find that quite appealing, actually, especially with the yellow flags over Ramsdale and Dubravka at the moment.
Yep, agree with you. All right, we'll leave it there then. There were so many other questions, and obviously we couldn't go through all of them. I've actually also listed a few of them, but unfortunately we couldn't go through all of them. But thank you for sending all your questions and your questions in the chat. I think we'll move to the bus team now, Ted.
Yep. Okay. Yep. So we've got yours up. So it's a 3-4-3, and I must say, Pras, I'm pretty jealous of this team. How on earth did you get to this?
Early transfers. I have to. My secret is this international break wasn't as restful for me because I had exact money for Dean and Jimenez to Cancelo and Weghorst, and Dean was about to drop, I think 3 or 4 days ago, And I was like, if that happens, then I just can't make this move. And I didn't have any other move that wouldn't have required a hit. So I just went for it. So I've been pretty nervous. For example, last night when Cancelo was playing that very important game against North Macedonia, Weghorst luckily didn't play, but then everyone else seems to have come through unscathed. And the other reason I went for the early transfer is I have a stacked bench. If Ramsdale isn't fit, I've got Sa to come in. If James isn't fit or Cancelo would have been injured, Doherty is sitting on the bench, and have Kulusevski as well in case anything else happened. So my team for the listeners is Ramsdale in goal, Robertson, James, and Cancelo in defense. I've got Salah, Martinelli, Saka, and Rafinha in midfield. I've got Broha, Weghorst, and Kane in up front. And as I mentioned, on the bench, I have Sa in goal, Kulusevski, Doherty, and Trent as my third sub. So it's a very stacked team. It's got 15 good players. I don't know yet who I'm benching between Kulusevski and Broha, or even Doherty. And honestly, if somebody tells me to bench Weghorst for Kulusevski, I won't hate it. So I need to decide.
My team is an absolute shambles compared to that. I know you've spent your 2 free transfers. I have 2 free transfers as well, so hopefully you can give me some advice sorting mine out. But the fact that you've got Kulusevski and Doherty on your bench is really rubbing salt in the wounds, it has to be said. So yeah, no, absolutely fantastic team. You should be really happy about having this. I guess what are your moves for the future? Are you going to be moving funds to midfield at some point?
This backline should basically not change unless there's an injury. So the idea is going forward, I'll save a transfer next week and then decide how I want to shape this team. I could do a luxury move in game week 33 for a Kane to a Ronaldo. Now, I'm not suggesting I want to do that, but maybe if I feel the captaincy, I might do that. But I'm very open because what I've done since game week 26 wildcard is basically I've sold players I don't want. I've sold only Wolves and Aston Villa players so far. And I've only bought players that I want, which is I've bought James, I've bought Cancelo, and obviously Weghorst is the exception here. So that's what I'm trying to do, such that I'm keeping a close tab on people who are wildcarding. So I'm as well set up as them. And then ultimately, even with the free hit, I have no plan right now. I could sit on game week 32 and TA could still be out, Ramsdale could be out, and I may just go for it. And that's basically, that's my mindset. Ideally, I would like to avoid it in 33 and have that option value in 36, 37. That's the way I'm playing. I think I'm very happy with the team now, and this is going to stay. The core of this is going to stay for the rest of the season, I hope.
Really nice. I mean, that back four is, that's just such a nice back four. I mean, you're comparing it to my double Wolves and Digne and Doherty, and I'm playing the wrong game here.
Look, I suffered in game week 30 because this team obviously did not have a lot of game week 30 players, and the ones that did decided not to show up, which is Rafinha, Martinelli, Ramsdale, Dean, who's been out, and Jimenez. So I had 5 reliable players who decided to get a total of -2 between them. So, I got punished there, but yeah, this was the upside.
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, you don't even have that much pressure on you for the free transfers. I think you can probably even roll next week and be fairly happy. How many doublers do you think you'll end up having in 33?
I'll probably have Rafinha to Barnes or Maddison is on the cards. So you'll have 3 Arsenal, 1 Leicester, and Weghorst. So that's 5, and Broha 6.
Yeah,
and then you add to the fact that you have 2 from Liverpool. I mean, I may start Trent or Robertson. May start both. So 3, and then I have Cancelo and James. I'll have a benching headache even in game week 33.
It's a nice problem to have, though. Once you make a decision about your starting 11, those other players are only there to enable you, not to cause you outcome bias and disappointment. So yeah, no, it's really good. Shall we look at the shambles that is my team, and we can spend the rest.
Got 2 free transfers. Let's go through it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to move to that. Okay. So for the podcast listeners, I've got Ramsdale in goal, like you, Pras, and then Digne, Saiss, and Doherty in the back 3. Obviously, Trent would have been in there, but he's on the bench, red flagged. Rafinha, Salah captain, Saka, Kulusevski and Coutinho in midfield, and then Lacazette and Kane up front. So you can see that I really went for it in the back end of the last 4 or 5 game weeks, loading up on the players that doubled and then played in game week 30. So I've got a lot of Wolves, a lot of Villa, Rafinha at Leeds to sort of get rid of in the next 4 or 5 weeks. And I'll talk you through what I've been planning recently. And it's potentially a -4 with 3 transfers this week. And that would be something like Jimenez down to Gelhardt instead of Weghorst, just to fund some premium moves. I would get rid of Coutinho and maybe get Havertz or Foden, and then upgrade maybe Saiss to a Reece James or a Laporte or something like that. And then aim to upgrade Cody to the other premium option that I want in defence, and then eventually upgrade Rafinha to Maddison or Barnes, and then maybe even Kulusevski to Foden or Havertz, whichever one I haven't got. So I think the team will look healthy after those moves, but there's quite a lot to be done. And I don't want to rush it either, because hits don't necessarily work off when they don't necessarily work when we're trying to navigate all of these weeks, especially ignoring quite a lot of double game week players in 33.
Yeah, look, I get all your dilemmas, and luckily the Wolves Villa game isn't that bad for points. I mean, I'd back Villa, even though it's an away game for them against Wolves. I don't like, as I mentioned, the Wolves defense. So, I mean, one option if you wanted to avoid a hit, I do agree, by the way, in this team, you shouldn't be going Weghorst. You've got enough money up front anyway.
Yeah.
This is the time to actually get it out. And I'm also jealous that you could go right down to Gelhardt, because you don't need a bench boost in the future. Put money in defense. So if you wanted to save the hit, one option is you just upgrade a Cody or maybe a Saiss, because that he's more expensive unnecessarily. So Jimenez and Saiss to Cancelo if you really wanted to, or a James, and a cheap defender, a cheap attacker. That cheap attacker could be Broha if you wanted to go up a little bit higher to give you an extra doubler, or it could be Gelhardt. So that's one move. I like your other move as well. You'll just be getting Foden earlier than others, while others are going for Weghorst. You'll be going for Foden. Makes complete sense to me. I definitely think Foden will start against Liverpool. He should start as well. He didn't play the England second game. Not that it matters to Pep, but higher chance that Foden starts against Burnley, which is again a great fixture. Either way, I mean, I would slightly be inclined to do Cancelo, because I think he's, in my mind, higher priority than anyone else, and just do Jimenez and Saiss to an attacker and Cancelo. But if you're hot on James, and if you get the right notes from Tuchel, I think your Foden and James is very, very good. I think that's a great move.
That's what I'm leaning towards. It might be Havertz, because I think that the midfield, I'm sort of prioritizing the midfield over the defence. I don't know whether that's wrong, but maybe that's where our teams slightly diverge. But I want a midfield 5 of Havertz, Foden, Saka, Salah and Maddison. I think that would be excellent until the end of the season, because Leicester obviously have their double game weeks. Yeah, I know people are a bit doubtful about Maddison's minutes. It would be from game week 33 that I would transfer him in. So hopefully over the next couple of game weeks, I might get a little bit more comfortable about seeing him play. Maybe Vardy's back. I think Maddison's a better option when Vardy's back as well. A little bit reticent about getting Harvey Barnes, if I'm completely honest, even though he's playing a little bit closer to goal than Maddison, but that's to be expected. I think just Maddison's a better player. But nevertheless, prioritising midfield over defence and getting through the defence with the likes of Alexander-Arnold, Laporte and Reece James, I don't think is too bad a compromise. Yes, I'll be ignoring Cancelo and Robertson. Those will be the biggest worries. But otherwise, the team looks solid.
Yeah, I totally agree. And your team encapsulates the dilemma people have, which is, should I put my money in defense versus should I put my money in midfield? And our teams are a perfect encapsulation of that, where I don't think there's a right answer. It really depends on who you want to go for. The thing with the defenders is they're all rotation risks as well. I mean, James with his minutes, you never know. I mean, Laporte should be okay, but again, not that much of an upside. So you have to compromise somewhere. You can't have it all. And I think that's the decision you'll have to make. But look, this team doesn't look as great because you've got 2 frees to make. I have made my 2 frees. But yeah, I think it's a good place to be in.
What we were talking about earlier about prioritizing the moves, if anyone is in the same position as me, another opportunity. Well, before we get into that, when I look at this team, I go, what are the weak points? And immediately, the weak point is the defence. I mean, I think the midfield, even with Rafinha, Kulusevski and Coutinho, is fine for this week. I could easily play that and they'd be fine. But Digne and Saiss, not completely comfortable with that. So potentially, maybe the first moves I need to make are enabling the moves with Jimenez down to Gelhardt and then 2 defender transfers to catch up with the likes of Pras, who have beaten us all to 4 premium defenders. Reece James and Laporte, or Reece James and Robertson, or whoever I want, really. So I might be edging towards that instead. And then...
You're 2 defenders.
Sorry?
So if you went Jimenez down to Gelhardt, who could you afford for Dean and Saiss, for example?
So that would give me 3 million. 1.2 needed for Saiss to Reece James. That would leave me with 1.8. Yeah, you could go Digne to Cancelo, couldn't you? That would be pretty decent, wouldn't it? Gelhardt and then Reece James and Cancelo with Alexander-Arnold on the bench. I could just go Laporte and then keep the rest of the money for upgrading the midfielder further down the line. That's probably what I would go for. It's very tempting to go Robertson, but then I don't have enough money to upgrade the rest of my team. So, yeah.
See, the thing is, they'll try their best to get Trent ready for City. They have to.
Yeah.
Because they still have Tsimikas on the left. They have nobody on the right. I mean, Milner will probably have to end up playing there. It's not ideal. They will try their very best to get him ready. So I think this whole Salah missing out and people getting a rest is a little bit overblown. These teams are used to playing midweek, weekend, and they'll I'm hoping Ramsdale, Trent will be back. I think the week after. Ramsdale could even be back now. A lot of these yellow flags will disappear.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And yeah, might be even tempted to a -8 if Dubravka and Ramsdale are both out. And get on board with your Pope to Mendy plan. That would be quite cool.
Yeah. Excellent. I would say we can leave it there. I would firstly thank you, Ted, for stepping in, for saving the show today.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure.
And again, apologizing to the people who were waiting in the afternoon. We won't take that lightly. I mean, we do apologize for that. And hopefully, Sonaldo will be healthy, fit, and ready for next week.
Fingers crossed. Yes, hopefully not stressing too much out there, Sonaldo, and hopefully getting some rest because it's quite late in South Korea. I'm sure it's early morning.
4 a.m. or 3 a.m. The man never sleeps, but that's a different topic. Anyway, thank you very much again, Ted, and thank you everyone for joining Burning Questions. We will see you again next week.
Okay, all the best, guys. Bye.
Bye.